Divorced people, what was the exact moment in your marriage you realized it's over? He forgot my birthday. He cheated on me, and I was actually going to forgive him for it. We were in the middle of buying a house. I was putting all the money down and in New York City, and I basically thought I was in too deep and we could work it out. Then my birthday came. I was depressed, and since we'd recently moved to New York City, I was very alone. My mom came down to visit me, and we were talking about everything, and I mentioned he hadn't even wished me a happy birthday. I saw her get on her phone for a moment while we were walking through Central Park, and within 5 minutes I got a happy birthday text from him. I knew she had reminded him. That was it. Canceled the house sale, got all my good faith money back, moved in with a coworker I barely knew who became my best friend to this day, and made my ex pay me back all the money I had spent clearing his debt. I'm now married to a wonderful, supportive man and working my dream job now. Next story. I was watching TV downstairs. My wife was watching a different show upstairs in our bedroom. While watching TV, I was also reconciling the checking account and looked for receipts in her purse. I did this all the time. I found a pill bottle containing Viagra. We'd been in a rough patch recently, and I thought maybe she got this to spice things up. I took the bottle upstairs and walked into the bedroom grinning and showing the pill container. The look on her face said everything. I wasn't supposed to find that, and she had been cheating on me with an older coworker that actually needed it. Narrator's commentary. I obviously don't condone cheating, but come on. She had the easiest way out in the world. He didn't think anything of it. He was just like, oh, that's exciting. And she folded like a damn leaf. Next story. My aunt took me out to dinner. I even remember the dish I ate, and almost 20-some years later, I can still taste it, and told me about the crap my cousin was going through with her boyfriend. Except everything she said was something my husband had done to me. Then she put a small pile of printouts in front of me, and it was all the texts I had sent my parents and brothers regarding each incident. It was shocking. She told me she had a moving van ready, and my other various cousins ready to help me move out. She had a few police officers there because my ex had a habit of getting very violent. Next story. I remember the moment clear as day. We were at a Goo Goo Dolls concert and having a good time. We hadn't been intimate in a year. I thought to myself, if I just kiss him now, we can get back on track. The next thought I had was, nah, I never want to kiss him again. And so I did nothing and felt relieved. It still took me more than 3 months to really recognize what I was feeling, but that moment was the one I had stopped feeling trapped in a bad situation and made the first decision on my own. Next story. Not divorced, but I was with someone for a really, really long time. I found out the morning of our friend's wedding I was a bridesmaid in, and he was a groomsman, that my nana had died. I was also doing the bride's wedding hair and makeup. I told everyone I wasn't bailing, but just not to ask me any questions about it. I told him that I would like to not stay very late because I don't know how well I could keep it together after the dinner and during the dancing, etc. We compromised and said we would stay for an hour after the dinner finished. I asked him if we could dance, and he told me no. Then, when the hour was up, I asked if we could head out because he had drove us there, and he said he wanted to stay and go to an after party with some people. I told him if he didn't come home with me that we were over, and I was going to my parents to spend the night. I think because I'd been a pushover, he didn't expect me to actually leave. He said not to overreact, and he'd be home in a couple of hours. Anyway, it was 4 or 5 a.m., and he was drunk, and obviously they dabbled with other party extracurriculars. He showed up at my parents' house and came up to where my bedroom was. I yelled at him and told him to leave and that we were over. I felt like I had the strength from my nana rolling in her grave that day at the idea of letting someone treat me this way for such a long time and not listening to me. Next story. I had planned a whole day date around things that he wanted to do for a Sunday, starting with taking the ferry to a brunch place that he wanted to try, going to a movie that he wanted to see, followed by trying out a new bar I knew he would like. Full day that he was well aware of, and that meant we needed to leave around 11 a.m. Saturday night, we got into a little tiff because he was deep in his cup. He's an alcoholic, and he went down to smoke. He didn't come back up, and I went to bed. It's not unusual for him to sit outside for a while and hang out, so I figured he would come up and come to bed in a bit. I woke up at 8:45 or 9 in the morning to see him high on coke, with half a bottle of wine in his hand, stumbling through the door. I took myself on that date and called a lawyer. Edit. This was a couple of years ago. It took me a lot of courage to actually go through with everything, but the movers come tomorrow to get his stuff, and he flies out on Tuesday. I can finally be free. Next story. In the hospital room with my 5-hour-old son, her phone goes off while she's at a procedure. I get to see 100 I love you and I miss you texts to her ex-boss. I DNA swabbed my son, and yes, he's mine. I cannot begin to explain how much it hurts to see your wife tell someone else I love you more than they have told you. Throw in the fact I decided not to say a word to avoid postpartum depression and harm my son. It was the worst 6 months of my life. Hurt more than my cancer treatment did. Divorce is almost finalized. I went to therapy and I'm doing well mentally and physically and ready for the next stage of my life. Next story. I had changed jobs to a totally different field and was having a really hard time with my new boss. I desperately needed support from my partner. But instead of comforting me, she told me that the boss was probably right and that I sucked. From that moment on, I knew she was gone. She asked for a divorce a few weeks later. Before that, I had financially supported her through her new education and patiently listened for hours to all her problems. Through it all, I had been there for her, taking on most of the housework, cooking, managing the children, and working full-time to support her dream. I mean, it just goes to show that you can do everything you can, but you can't make someone love you. So just find someone who does instead. Best of luck out there, OP. Next story. Not divorced, but left in an 11-year relationship. It wasn't all at once. It was the gradual straws that kept breaking. When I realized how dumb he thought I was, when he was fired from his 4th job, when I had to hear that everything bad only happens to him for the 1,000th time, when the money he owed me reached $10,000, when he ruined every fun moment for me, like putting his hands over his ears at concerts, when he told me I only had the life I had because I was lucky, when I realized I was the only one trying to make it work. I remember one day just thinking, I'm done. I said it, and he didn't care because he thought I was incapable of living without him. I can't even remember the convo that day. I just remembered where I was and the moment I just couldn't do it anymore. I felt so free and realized I grieved within the relationship for years. So I was quite confused when I felt relieved instead of immensely sad. Next story. Not my divorce, but my parents' divorce has an interesting story because I was why my mom was able to leave. After 17 years and 3 kids, my mom decided it was time to go after she came home at 3 a.m. after a 12-hour graveyard shift to find her 8 and 10-year-old children outside in below freezing weather because her tweaked-out husband had locked them out. He began to freak out, put my brother in a chokehold, so my sister ran outside. My brother eventually convinced him to let him go, and he also ran outside. Then my dad locked them both out. This was after years of horrendous physical abuse against my mom as well. Fast forward a few weeks later, I'm at my grandma's. My dad begins to beg my mom to take him to the hospital because he's, quote, hurting so bad he can't walk. She initially says no, but after he continued to beg, she gave in. They go to the hospital down the road, and of course, they don't give him anything. He's a junkie. They return to my grandma's, where he begins to beg her again to take him to the hospital. Begs and begs. She finally snaps and says, "No, if you want to go to the hospital, you can walk." He football tackles her to the ground, trying to get her keys out of her hand. This happened when I was 6. I'm 20 now. Even though I can't remember any of it, what I do remember clear as day was my mother screaming for him to get off of her. Cops were called, and when police showed, my mom didn't tell them there was a physical altercation. When the cop asked me what happened, I told them Daddy attacked Mommy. He was taken to jail. Him going to jail was exactly why she was able to pack up and leave. She raced me home, grabbed my siblings and gathered everything she could and was out. She was in a rush because she wasn't sure when he'd make bail. Next story. He had used MS Paint to Photoshop the balance of his credit card to make it look like he had $4,000 less on that card than he did. I didn't know it was Photoshopped until I saw it on the family desktop months later. But the stupidest part was how much work he went to in an effort to do this. We were trying to do regular financial meetings and always claimed my system was too difficult and he didn't understand how to budget. So I offered to show him how to look at his credit card statements and organize his charges so he could see what he was spending and how much. Then he'd be aware of the real numbers and adjust as he saw fit. He seemed to ask for help, and I was going to share how I tend to mine. I brought my credit card statements to the meeting. He claimed the printer was broken and couldn't print his statements. He wouldn't open the app. He just had a screenshot of the current balance. I closed my notebook and told him, I don't know, something feels really off about this, so I think I'm done tonight. The reality is that since he left me responsible to pay all the bills, fix all the overspending he did, and make things work, I had always had access to his Capital One account to pay his credit card monthly. You know, the kind of account that gives you a credit score refresh every month. I already knew the balance was off, but the way he acted like I was being weird and stupid was the absolute end of my ability to really try to make this marriage work. That was 2 years ago, almost to this day, and I'm still stuck in the purgatory of trying to divorce a guy like this. I will not miss the financial whiplash every month at all. It's so sad when someone lies about financials like this. Like, if you are that ashamed about what it looks like, about what the balance of your credit card is, that should be the clearest clue in the world to make active changes to fix it. That includes working with someone who's trying to help you, dude. It is okay to make a ton of financial mistakes and get yourself into a hole. It happens. But if you're not willing to let someone help you and to really be honest with them and yourself, you are going nowhere. Making mistakes is human. Refusing to fix them is foolish. Next story. He made me spend yet another weekend with his family who hated me and who would on purpose trigger my illness. I don't want to share any details about myself, but a similar example would be sneaking milk products into the food of someone lactose intolerant. Not deadly, but really uncomfortable. We got back home and I got a call about a family emergency, and he wouldn't come because he just didn't feel like it. I married quite young, and it was like this wave of, this could be my life for 70 years, and I felt like I woke up from a multi-year haze. Next story. 3 years ago, when he was hiding his coke addiction, he had become a shadow of the person I once knew. For months, he had been acting insane, including demanding my son and I move out of the house. He had this whole story about how his cousin was pregnant and needed the house and we were going to be evicted. Turns out he had knocked up his ex. But the real end came on my son's first day of school. He flipped out because he wanted us to move away and, according to him, my son shouldn't attend that school. I was teleworking that same day and he stormed into the bedroom and started beating me with my work laptop. He was arrested. I got a TRO the same day and a move-out order. I found out later the cousin wasn't pregnant and he had a kid on the way. Cleaning out his things, I found a lot of hidden drugs, Viagra, and sticky notes with many women's names and numbers. It was a terrible experience, but I'm so glad he's gone. Next story. I don't know what it is about your 30s, but something just changes. One day, I woke up and realized I was happier on my own than in my marriage. He cheated and I forgave him. He cheated again and I forgave him again. But somewhere along the way, I found myself. I started doing things on my own and realized I didn't need him to create my happiness. I loved that man with all my heart, but eventually I loved my peace more. I'm not divorced yet, but it's on the way. It's hard, but I've learned that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. He'll always have a place in my heart, but not everyone you're meant to love is meant to stay, and that's okay. Next story. When he hit me for the first and last time, I tried to end it then, but agreed to marriage counseling. Almost exactly a year later, no real change from him. We were all set to move within the next 2 weeks when all of a sudden, within less than a 3-week span, my grandfather had a heart attack and emergency heart surgery. My grandma caused a car accident with that grandpa in the car just days after his surgery, which sent him back to the hospital. The same day as the accident, my grandma had a dementia-fueled breakdown in which she pulled a machete on my uncle and had to be tackled by 4 sheriff's deputies so she could be taken to the hospital for a 48-hour psychiatric hold. My other grandpa, my father figure who helped raise me, died suddenly. My grandma had another break in which she was violent towards that first grandpa and placed on another 72-hour hold. The second died just before the weekend we were supposed to spend packing. Instead, we pushed the move a week ahead and planned the funeral. The viewing was that Monday, with the funeral on Tuesday. Both my husband and I went back to work on Wednesday. On Friday, I got home exhausted, trying to find some way to motivate myself to spend the whole weekend packing. Instead, my husband met me in the kitchen to tell me he had been fired again. This was the 4th time since we'd been married 3.5 years ago, and every single time, including this one, was because he lost control and raged at a woman he worked with. Read into that what you will. In that moment, I was so done. But I'd already switched off the emotional part of my brain, so I focused on the practical. I said, okay, well, then it looks like you'll be taking charge of the move, since you'll have time for it now. He then got upset with me for being cold and not comforting him during the hardest time of his life, he said. It took everything in me not to say, yeah, well, this has been the 4th time it has happened in less than 4 years, so you think you'd be used to it by now. Instead, I bit my tongue, took a deep breath, and explained we didn't have the luxury of a breakdown right now. We have to be adults and get crap done in a very limited amount of time. We could deal with everything once we got through the next few days. Let me tell you how this man looked me in the eye and told me he was upset that I wasn't comforting him not only over the loss of his job, but over the loss of my grandfather, because he really looked up to him and was gonna miss him. I think I just blinked at him for a solid 30 seconds while my brain went through a whole crash and reboot. Back when we'd started marriage counseling, I told the therapist I was only doing it so that later I could look back and tell myself I had tried everything, but that if I were being 100% honest, I, quote, had one foot out the door and the others not far behind it. As I saw zero accountability or work from him over the course of a year, there was not one thing that changed my initial sentiment. Then when he came home and said he'd been fired for a 4th time, I was done. Done. And then he still managed to push me even further so that I was triple done. Narrator's commentary. I don't know if this is going to be a hot take because, hey, I've never been married, but I feel like if you're at the point where you're saying you're a foot out the door and the other one not far behind it, you shouldn't keep trying, right? Because in my mind, when you're in that mindset, you need the other person to change an amount that they simply can't. Like you are looking for your partner to completely transform, and that's not going to happen. So if you have a foot out the door, why prolong it? Seems like a good way to just have misery for yourself and your partner for the next whatever long you decide to stay together. Being honest with yourself and knowing that is good. Being honest with other people is better. Next story. I was the sole breadwinner and sole health insurance provider for years, in support of his obtaining a bachelor's degree while also raising kids. After he graduated, I pushed him hard back into the workforce against his resistance. He found something that was okay for him and seemed stable. After some months, I ventured to state that I was not happy with my job and I would like the flexibility to look for other options, now that we had a bit of a buffer against financial ruin. The message was, this change is coming. Please think about what a supporting role will look like. It was meant to be a conversation opener, and over weeks and months I thought we'd talk about where I'd be applying. In response, he stayed up all night planning to go to a specific graduate school in another rural state, take the family there, and I could do, quote, whatever to support the family financially in that new location. So many details he was absolutely certain of and excited about, despite never talking about before. There would have been remedial classes to take as it was out of his field, and all of it would be funded with my whatever, however many years it took. I realized it would never be my turn. Next story. We'd been attending marriage counseling. Life was going a lot more smoothly and we were communicating well, or so I believed. We were at a nice restaurant having a nice meal celebrating our 5th wedding anniversary. The evening started out fine, but as it progressed, conversation became more and more stilted, to the point where he wouldn't look at me. He was just grunting monosyllabic noises instead of talking. When he began slouching and appeared to be pouting, I asked what was wrong. His response was, well, you won. What I won, according to him, was that I got everything I wanted from counseling and he got nothing. Nothing. I was completely blindsided and the night was ruined. I felt sick and couldn't finish my meal. I had been unaware that to him our marriage was a competition where each side scored points. In my mind, it was a partnership instead of a game. Right then and there, I said I was done and wanted out. So glad I rid myself of that immature man baby. Next story. Picture your first Christmas after you've both finally found well-paying jobs after 3 years of mostly me having a better paying job, but he's still working, just at a basic job. I got him various electronics and other things he wanted, stuff he'd been wanting for a bit. He gifted me kinkware and various other accessories, stuff he never talked to me about to see if I was even into it. Imagine opening a vinyl corset, G-string cheap crappy top hat, black satin opera-length gloves, thigh-high platform lace-up and zip-up boots plus 2 riding crops. That's it. That was freaking it. He gave me stuff to pleasure him, jerk. I know, I know it's just a crappy top hat, but I am just imagining he wanted you to dress up like a freaking stage magician. I expected one of these things to all of a sudden be a rabbit. Look, people can be into whatever they want. It's good to communicate with your partner about it. I'm just hung up on the top hat. That does it for you, man? Really? All right. Next story. He refused to speak to me for 3 months beyond what was necessary to keep our kids alive. He always used the silent treatment as a tactic, and that time, I refused. At 3 months, I told him I was done and wanted a divorce. He suddenly wanted to talk and do therapy and all the crap to make our marriage work, but I was done. I agreed to therapy. 4 therapists told him he'd been a crappy husband and that he was unlikely to win me back and to stop trying. It was 4 because every time they agreed with me that he was abusive, he'd quit that therapist and find another one. I left 17 years ago now. I regret absolutely nothing. Next story. I overheard a conversation between another friend couple. I'd built the outdoor dining tables myself, and at a party we were hosting, my ex said, "He did such a good job with these," to them. After a minute, she left to talk to someone else, and the husband didn't know I was standing behind him, and he said, "In all the years we've known them, that's the first nice thing I've ever heard her say about him." That was the beginning of the end. A couple years later, we had a huge fight about nothing that she conjured up out of thin air, and I was done. Next story. When I learned he tried to send my 3 children, ages 8 to 12, previous marriage, out of the country to a foreign boarding school. School called from Wales to confirm they had been accepted. This was on the same day I overheard him tell our 18-month-old, "Those kids are not your brothers or sisters. They don't have the same dad," meaning himself, "as you do. It's okay though, they're leaving." The divorce was final in 30 days, which landed him on the deportation list as I was his sponsor, and all 4 kids and I partied like hell. For context, I'm American. He's British-Australian. Next story. My mom was dying in the hospital, and myself, my dad, and brother were there. My husband wanted, quote, to be there for me, but didn't want to, also, quote, ruin his memory of my mom, so he refused to visit her at a certain point. Then we had to pull her off the ventilator, so he awkwardly waited in the waiting room, went home eventually while my dad and I watched my mom die. Then for the funeral, it came down to me picking out my mom's funeral outfit, helping my dad plan things, and having this local nursing group do this old school nursing roll call. But we had to call the nurses group because they were volunteers and we had to get on their schedule. My mom was a nurse. I asked him to call and help me get them set up and scheduled, but he couldn't find any time in his day. I told him I wanted a divorce 5 months later because I couldn't take it anymore. Next story. My ex was a car salesman and never home. He worked nights and weekends. I worked days. 2 kids. We didn't spend a lot of quality time together because it was truly hard unless you plan for it. We went on a 3-week cruise together, just us. It was absolute torture. I realized we were not aligned. All I kept thinking was, how can I retire and be happy with this person, being with them full time? I knew that we were doomed or something had to change. We were doomed. Marriage didn't last much longer as I couldn't get past so much. Context. We only dated 6 months when he proposed and married 9 months into our relationship. I was young and now know that this marriage should never have happened, but in the end, all good. Nothing negative. Next story. When he told me that he just wanted to do what he wanted to do, when he wanted to do it, and didn't want to answer to anybody for his actions. Actions, which included binge drinking every weekend to the point of peeing himself and having to be carried by his friends into the house. We were mid-late 20s, and he wanted to come home to completely ignore our dog, leaving him locked in his kennel, right next to the couch my ex would be sitting on when I arrived 2 hours later, meaning the dog would have been locked in his kennel for over 8 hours and often having peed himself. Well, I guess if he was fine with peeing himself, he figured the dog would be too. Can you blame him? Next story. When I was thinking to myself yet again that I couldn't understand how anybody could treat someone they loved so badly for the umpteenth time, it finally clicked that the answer was very simple. He didn't love me. It took me 2 more years before I left, but after I did, he finally admitted that he hadn't loved me since I got pregnant with our daughter. The daughter he said he wanted. He outright said that I didn't change or do something wrong. He just, quote, woke up one day and didn't love me anymore. I spent a decade paying this man's bills and doing almost all the work at home because I trusted his words. and not his actions. I overlooked the obvious because I couldn't imagine anyone actually being that terrible of a person. I was dumb. Next story. When I overheard him tell our 9-year-old daughter that her perfectly normal, bought by grandma, summer t-shirt and shorts were, quote, inappropriate, and she was not to wear them in public. That's when I realized how far down some shady internet rabbit holes he had delved. Everything was a conspiracy theory. Everything had some dark motive. Everyone was out to get him or make his life harder somehow. When that poison started to affect our sunny, perfectly well-adjusted kid, I could not allow that. It meant I had to spend years in limbo, separated but not too formally. Otherwise, she would have been alone with him half the time, custody, which I could not sanction. I made it work until she was old enough to see the craziness for herself and make her own decisions about seeing him, for the most part. A lot of self-sacrifice for me, but worth it. Next story. When she hit me, got arrested, and was trespassed from our apartment as well as the restaurant we co-owned. We should have split months prior, but it was my first and only marriage. I was determined to save it and not get divorced, even though I ate a mountain of crap in the process. Borderline personality disorder is an absolute nightmare, especially when the person is self-medicating with alcohol. The fights got worse and worse until it became physical, and that was it for me. I also commenced from that next day to working 70 to 80 hours per week for the next year. 2021 was a female dog. Next story. I'd been taking our elderly dog for all his vet visits, but was stuck working, so she asked her best friend to come with her. The vet told them his tumors were growing so fast that they were likely to cut off his airways and choke him soon, so he should be put down. Her friend stayed with her until I got home, and I found them eating pizza together. They had ordered 2 personal pan pizzas for themselves and nothing for me. They ordered the most shareable dinner on the planet, and went out of their way to exclude me. It was such an obvious metaphor for the marriage that I couldn't let go of it. I would never be a priority. I would never be a consideration. I would be left to figure out my own dinner while I mourned my dog. Next story. My son had complex medical problems that we were trying to get to the bottom of. I had to go out of state, ex-state and home state to golf, for a specialist. He was going to be in hospitals with sensors on his head for almost a week, so I bought him PJs that buttoned down the front so he could wash off. My ex got mad I didn't clear it with him first, gave me the silent treatment while our child was in the hospital. 5 days with no response or asking about his own son. It was so hard, and I did it without him. Sent him divorce papers the day after son was discharged from the hospital. Never been happier. Next story. It was today. I'm not divorced, but now I know I'm going for it, and will start taking the next steps. Finally broke me. I have a 2.5 and 4.5-year-old. The ginger has been sick and has conjunctivitis and not been able to sleep. I've not slept for the past 2 whole nights. I work a very hectic IT job from 9 to 5, but is usually more than that. Husband and I earn similar. I earn a bit more. I take 100% of the kids' responsibilities, except for their showers. He has a nasty temper and a god complex. He is remote and only goes to the office since he doesn't want to be near me, I guess. Not sure what's the reason. I asked him today to stay back a bit because my work has been crazy. Younger kid was at home and was absolutely miserable. I've already taken a lot of vacation days, and with the no sleep, I was almost crashing. The things he said, like the audacity of me to ask him to stay back. Such nasty temper, nasty attitude, and even worse words. I'm done. There is no looking back. Something in me just broke beyond all repair. I'm shivering, but there's a certain calm and relief in my head knowing I'm finally done, and the road I'll be heading on is clear. Next story. When he told me the day before my daughter got out of NICU that I needed to lose weight in my stomach. Then less than a year later he asked why I don't want to sleep with him anymore. I was honest and said because he doesn't give me any affection anymore, and asked why. His answer was because, quote, "You let yourself go." I weighed maybe 150, struggling with the diabetes from having gestational diabetes, and was the only one taking care of both of our kids working a full-time job too. We're still married and working on things, but I'm checked out because nothing has really changed. Until I can get my financial crap figured out and what he owes me from his business, I'm headed for a lawyer and dipping out. Next story. I haven't been divorced, but have some precautionary words of advice to women. I was engaged at 21 while pregnant. Venue, dress, photographer, and such purchased. My wonderful stepmom, who told her daughter the same, told me, just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you have to get married. It didn't land or click right away, but 6+ months later I called it off. Wasn't excited about marriage. Did some couples counseling later and left before my child was 3. Best decisions I've ever made. My mom passed when I was still in middle school, so having my stepmom's support was crucial. They still have my dress they paid for 15-ish years later. Next story. When he disrespected my sister. I was in a physical, verbal, and emotionally abusive marriage and was bearing it for almost a decade. Culturally, it was hard for me to go for divorce, and I was disassociating hard in it. One day, I was working, and my sister came to my place, and we decided to go to the market. This man/man-child was looking for his socks and asked me. I told him it's in the dryer, and please help yourself as I'm working, and I need to share this in 10 minutes. He started screaming at me like, "How dare you talk to me like this? And what, you think only your work is important?" and name-calling. He was unaware that my sister is also in the house and she was listening to all of this. After 15 minutes, she had to intervene that, "Hey, can you be polite? You're shouting for like 10 minutes. Then he called my sister mean things, and it was over for me. I said it. I said, "This is over." Next story. While I was pregnant with my second child, we moved to Southwest Philly. It was temporary. We only lived there for a year. I had no family, no friends. My ex-husband worked all the time. I had severe postpartum depression. I'm driving my white child to kindergarten through the hardest neighborhoods in the West and Southwest Philly. I was trying to nurse and it wasn't working. One day when he came home, I'm sitting on the bed hysterically crying, no shirt on, trying to feed my baby. My newborn baby is starving, crying. This mother effer had the audacity to say to me, "I don't understand what your freaking problem is. You have this beautiful newborn baby. Why are you crying? You need to get it together." It was at that point he lost me emotionally. I went on to marry him. I loved him. I loved our children and our family. It took him 8 years to propose and 10 to marry me. I was more interested in being a bride than I was a wife. When my youngest started kindergarten, I had been a stay-at-home mom for 6 years. I wanted to get a little crap part-time job. I found an ad on Craigslist for a barista/sandwich maker at a local coffee shop. I went in to fill out the application and there she was, the owner of the establishment. I never believed in love at first sight until that day. We've been together for 16 years. And in case anyone was wondering, my marriage lasted 3. Next story. When he threw a fit about me sabotaging him by mentioning that maybe the kids were getting tired of frozen chicken lo mein. He thought I was sabotaging him because I bought it at the grocery store. I bought it because he put it on the grocery list. It was a bad enough tantrum that he threatened to take his own life. And I ended up with a huge friction burn on my arm because when I went to grab the rope he was threatening with, it got wrapped around me. He then grabbed it and pulled and would not let up even though I said it was hurting me. There was pure hate in his eyes. I could tell he wanted to hurt me. There were so many things building up to that, so it wasn't the only reason, but that is the moment I just knew I couldn't walk on eggshells anymore to keep him from exploding. It was the point when the last bit of hope that things would get better evaporated. Next story. Still married, 25 plus years. Little signs everywhere, like not being comforted when a very close friend, like a mom, passed from COVID. No affection. Not looking up from his computer after telling him I was assaulted by my brother when I was 11-ish, like I never said it. Yesterday was my birthday and I'm across the country due to a family emergency. I got a happy birthday text. No call, no FaceTime, no flowers delivered. There was time. Did I mention there wasn't a call? Emotionally unsupported as a co-parent in a low-contact estrangement situation with an adult child. Walks away during uncomfortable conversations. Forgets important things happening in my daily life that were mentioned the day before, belittles my college choice from 15 years before we were married, seems to throw it in my face every 5 years or so. My energy for the relationship has been sucked dry, doesn't even stand up for me. I remember everything he shares with me. Anyway, thanks for listening. Let this thread be inspirational. If you're single out there and looking for a partner, this thread should tell you if you are a decent person, if you have love in your heart, you should have no problem out there. It might take a little while to find the right one, but seriously, people, this is your competition. The bar is so low. If you just love someone, you're already way ahead of the curve, it seems. Next story. We were arguing. He was yelling and I was crying, and I turned and I saw my 5-year-old hiding under a towel in the bathroom. I stopped crying, ignored my now ex-husband, took my son to school. We had a great day, and as soon as my son fell asleep, I told his dad, he had to leave. I could endure a lot and felt responsible for being yelled at. I felt like he lost control and hit walls and broke things because I wasn't good enough. But I wouldn't allow my son to feel that way, so he had to leave. It was a wake-up call. My son is 12. They have a strained relationship because his dad isn't interested. They see each other every other weekend and we're far better now. I'm glad I woke up and asked him to leave, but I regret waiting so much, and believing that because he wasn't hitting us, he wasn't violent, and it didn't affect my son. Next story. There were actually a few, since I kept showing up to try to make it work. But the first was after I relocated for him to go back to school, and subsequently witnessed him drop out of school immediately. It was just a repeat of how he handled every challenge in his and our life, by shutting down and refusing to work or take any responsibility. Only this time it had severe repercussions for my basic needs, because without him being a student, we would lose housing in an extremely expensive city that we otherwise couldn't afford to live in. So we relocated again. I decided to ride it out because I didn't have enough money to land on my feet if I left him. I told him that's how I felt, and I said he could consider that his opportunity to either grow or lose me. I stayed in that destructive holding pattern for a year and a half. The other most notable moment was when I went back to where I'm from for a few weeks and cried every day because I didn't want to go back to our, quote, home. We were together over 6 years and I should have left him after 6 months. Basically, he paid lip service to values that we were supposed to share, and he was young, and I thought maybe he would grow up and grow into who he said he was and wanted to be. Huge waste of my life. I'm doing a lot better now. Next story. I received an anonymous Father's Day card telling me my wife was cheating on me. Never found out from whom, but she admitted to it. I gave her the choice to end it, and she didn't. She filed and dragged me through the muck. By the end, I was awarded custody of my youngest daughter and received child support. My oldest daughter was over 18 and went with her mother. Our home was foreclosed soon after. She married the guy she cheated with. I lived with my brother for a year, then moved back in with my elderly widowed mother. Months later, I was forced into early retirement at my job of 25 years. I worked another job for 9.5 and was laid off, then another for 3 years and was laid off again. My mother died, and I inherited her house, where I currently live. Between the last 2 jobs, my ex died of cancer. I'm currently in forced retirement due to my inability to find work in my chosen career due to my age. I just filed for early Social Security, and I'm just running out the clock. Roll credits. Next story. Her parents visited constantly and stayed with us, usually at least 1 weekend a month. To be fair, they were always nice to me and usually paid for everything while they were there, but our plans always had to revolve around them. It was just too much. Then my parents came to visit for the first time ever, and my ex basically stayed shut away in our bedroom the entire time. She said she was sick, and maybe she was, but it was 3 full days of avoiding them. We were supposed to spend the next 2 days with my parents at a nice resort. We had our own room, and all they really wanted to do was have dinner together one night. Since she was still saying she felt sick, we were already half expecting her to back out, and she did. I ended up going without her. I enjoyed the hell out of that $700 a night room and had a good time with my folks. It wasn't just that one trip either. There had been other moments where she showed almost no patience or interest when it came to my family, and it had started to build up. My parents aren't hard people to be around. They've lived interesting lives, are intelligent and curious about new people, have friends all over the world, and somehow know half the planet, including some pretty famous people. I'm not saying everyone has to adore them, but dinner with them is not exactly a punishment, especially when they're footing a several $100 bill. That trip was when I knew. She was someone who planned everything to death to the point where missing one thing on an itinerary could ruin her afternoon. So watching her put no effort into something that I'd planned and mattered to me after I spent so much time making room for her family made it pretty clear where I stood. Next story. I think it was over for my mother when she got pregnant with me. She didn't want kids, just wanted to get away from where she lived. For my father, I think it was over for him deep down when she was doing shady stuff on her phone. But I don't think it's over for him. He still misses the idea of her and feels an enormous amount of guilt for the way both of their lives turned out and ended. They have been divorced for 13 years now. Just 2 broken children who had children after isolating themselves in a new culture with no family or friends. I knew it was over for them when I was 5. Next story. To make a long story very short, got a call from our marriage counselor who explained what doctor-patient confidentiality was, then told me it didn't apply when kids were involved and she was a mandatory reporter. She told me I had 5 days to come up with a plan to get her to not be my daughter's primary caregiver since she was unemployed and taking my daughter with her when she would go get high. She then told me she couldn't see my ex quitting ICE because my ex told her there weren't any issues with the marriage. She literally forced me to make a choice between her and our daughter, and it wasn't a hard decision. That's how I became a single parent with a 4-year-old daughter. I wouldn't have it any other way. That was 32 years ago. Next story. We were discussing the homework given by our fourth couples therapist about what we each needed to feel safe in a relationship. When he started replying with how he couldn't give me anything I needed, I felt an eerie sense of calm. Told him to pause so I could write his responses down because I knew I was going to need to reread them. He said he couldn't be congruent in his words and actions because he'll say and do whatever he needs to. He said he couldn't protect our relationship because he thought sacrificing it was protection from the inevitable harm that would happen, so might as well let the harm happen without a fight. He said he couldn't respect my body because, quote, banging felt wrong as I wasn't in banging shape. I couldn't use the word divorce. I just told him we shouldn't be together anymore. 15 years. I had nothing left. Next story. She said she didn't love me anymore. Moved the goalpost on timeline repeatedly, got vindictive and mean, and started accusing me of emotional abuse. However, she then wanted us to be best friends and raise our daughter platonically, and refused to move out for months while dating men, we are 2 women, and coming home drunk covered in hickeys. The nail in the coffin was her calling me an awful human in front of our daughter because she had pushed me and my legal team to release $200,000 premarital assets to buy a house, but then decided she couldn't afford a home, so she was going to rent an apartment using our joint account to fund it. I said no, and she melted down. I knew in that exact moment that any shred of anything remotely positive towards her was gone, and my sole focus became my daughter and my own happiness. Next story. When because of my morals we stayed celibate, on our wedding night he told me he'd been physiologically impotent for years, but knew I wouldn't leave him once we were married. 3 months later, as his mask slipped off his covert narcissistic face and he began devaluing me behind closed doors, it was over. Once he saw that I wasn't co-signing his bullcrap, he talked me into taking his dream trip to Israel, where I'd lived 6 years with my beloved first husband. The whole trip he just simmered. Couldn't stand that I spoke fluent Hebrew, didn't appreciate my translating every time we were with Israelis, and threw a massive temper tantrum at the airport because security checked everybody's luggage. Almost got shot, but I made excuses for him and smoothed over his behavior, in Hebrew, to the armed security forces, after I'd already scolded him about never messing with a retired Mossad who took security posts. I should have let him get shot. Back in the States, I drove home from New York City/Kennedy in total silence because I just didn't have words for what he'd done. He had another tantrum and hit me with a closed fist in my face. I threw him out of my house and signed the papers to divorce him. I was done. That was 11 years ago and was one of the best decisions I'd ever made. Next story. When she spiraled because I went to breakfast with a friend the morning after we had a fight over me asking to not go to a party because I'd missed half a week of work due to a mental health episode and I was still feeling off. The parties she would go to were always giant house parties. DJ, lights, drinking games, people hooking up in hallways and bedrooms and bathrooms, even in our 30s. And I didn't have room for that at the time. I was berated, mocked, and put down and told, "I'm tired of having to tell people you can't come. It's embarrassing. Like, what do I even say?" I told her to just tell anyone if they ask that I'm not feeling well, and I wish everyone has a good time and happy birthday to the birthday girl. Then she didn't text me for the rest of the night or early hours when I was just texting to ask if she was okay, still alive, did she need a ride? Nothing. I found out the next morning from another friend she was fine and had spent the night. I had made plans the day before to have coffee with my friend to process some of how I was feeling and trying to figure out why my mental health has been so bad. Hindsight 2020 indeed. As I'm walking out the door, X walks in, asks, "Where do you think you're going?" I told her, as I said in my text, I'm going to coffee with my friend. I'll be back later. "Don't you think I would want to take you to coffee? Why didn't you think about that? Are you serious? You don't want to talk about last night?" Well, I do, and I don't, but we can talk about it later. Friend is picking me up in a few minutes, so you'll still have the car if you wanted it. She proceeds to yell at me, cuss me out, tell me how horrible of a wife I am, how could I do this to her. Our roommate and friend is sitting on the couch the whole time, reading with her eyebrows slowly rising higher and higher, making glanced eye contact with me between her book and my ex. Ex goes upstairs and I ask, "That was uncalled for, right? Like, I'm not crazy? Roommate says, no, that was definitely ridiculous. After that necessary validation for both of us, we say goodbye and I head to coffee. Halfway through coffee, my friend and I decide we want breakfast, and I text my ex that plans evolved and we're going to breakfast and I'd be back sometime in the afternoon. She then proceeds to blow up my phone, texts back to back, walls of text and some just a few words. Then she starts calling me. I pick up once to tell her what she's doing is excessive and inappropriate, and I'll talk to her when I get home. I'm not going to be picking up for the remainder of my time with my friend. Then she proceeds to blow up my friend's phone. Friend also picks up once and says something similar to what I said. Then we both put our phones on Do Not Disturb. We check them in the car and my gut sinks. I've almost 30 missed texts, 12 missed calls, 4 voicemails. It wasn't even an hour. My friend has about 10 missed texts, 3 missed calls, and 1 voicemail. But a twist! The voicemail is from her boyfriend, who's on vacation in Montana rock climbing with his brother. Yet my ex thought it would be okay to call him and ask him why we aren't picking up, and makes it sound like an emergency, so he's calling my friend worried. The voicemails she left me went sharply downhill in paranoia and delusion. I was scared. My friend took me to her house an hour later after not responding, because I can barely process how quickly the day had escalated into something so surreal. Then my ex shows up at my friend's house. No one told her where we were, but she knew. My friend tries to de-escalate and is able to convince my ex to go home, and that I would be home a certain time, but she had to leave me alone until then. No more calls or texts, and to use that time to calm herself down. I go home. I didn't want to, but I did. She proceeds to immediately talk about how she's not responsible for what happened. It's my fault for making her feel the way she feels. I tell her I'm not going to engage with her the way she's talking at me. She then proceeds to scream, Okay, I'm sorry. I ask her if she even knew what she's supposedly sorry for, and she just starts crying and asking me not to leave her. Grabs my arm, pulls me to sit next to her on the couch, and then hugs me and pulls me down to lay next to her. I'm stiff as a board as she tries to kiss me, but I don't kiss back. She sits us back up and proceeds to tell me she won't do it again. I've barely responded aside from okay at this point, because in my head, I'll never feel safe with her again. I stayed another 6 months, I believe. It was the beginning of the end. Final moment was how she reacted to me receiving a small inheritance, $6K, and how immediately it was her talking ways we could use our money, then proceeded to lose her crap when I told her it was my money. I told my mom about our finances without telling my ex, and I admit that wasn't cool. It was so my mom could help me figure out things and detangle what we should each be responsible for that was more fair than me paying for 2/3 of anything. Anyway, that was it. There are plenty of stories that are shoulda, woulda, coulda moments, and to this day I still get nauseated over a lot of them. How could I not see it? How, when I did see it, could I not have left? I had all the support in the world available to me to leave at any time. I thought I'd be a failure. I believed my sexuality and my identity would be in question and I'd be shunned. I'm bi. It's black and white from the outside, but inside it's an ocean you drown in made from shades of gray. Next story. My wife, ex-wife now, was having an affair. She didn't want to commit to him and she invited me over to my own house. I was in the military at the time, and since I was the soldier, I had to live in the barracks while she lived on base housing with the kids on Mother's Day to spend time. The guy she was having an affair with called and she refused to answer. I called him and told him we were trying to reconcile, and she told him it was a lie while I was right there looking at her. When I realized she was more concerned about his feelings than mine, I knew it was over. It being over had been one of the best things to happen to me. Next story. I was 2 weeks postpartum. I had a rough pregnancy with a major surgery at 30 weeks, then delivery at 39. When I say rough, I mean in the ICU on a ventilator. I needed to follow up with my surgeon, so asked my then husband to go into work a few hours late and keep the baby so I could attend this appointment and really address the issues I was having healing. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You can just take the baby with you. You'll be fine. Single moms do it all the time." From that moment, I knew I'd be a single mom eventually. I stayed for another 2 years, but that moment told me everything I needed to know about how he would be as a spouse and father. Next story. There were a lot of moments, but the final nail in the coffin is what I call the cookie incident. I was on a pretty hardcore diet plan, and he kept bugging me to make him chocolate chip cookies, which led to a big fight. I was over it. I looked him dead in the eyes and told him, I don't love you anymore. He left the house and came back 2 hours later with cookie supplies, gave me a big smile and hug, and said we could make them together and watch a movie like nothing had happened. I knew then that there was something deeply wrong with him, and it wasn't going to change. Next story. Her mom passed away, and she quit being a wife. Apparently, she was checked out years earlier, according to her, and continued to play the role of the loving, happy wife. Once her mom was gone, she felt like she no longer would be judged by her actions and reckless behavior. She wanted to live her best hoe life and see multiple men and have many different experiences. Experiences she didn't have earlier in life due to getting married at a young age. She said it wasn't my fault, and it's just something she felt she had to do to be honest to herself. After nearly a decade and a half of marriage, she decided she wasn't getting any younger and wanted her freedom back in her early 30s. We divorced pretty quickly and went our separate ways. That was 13 years ago this summer. I remarried 3 years later and now have a child. Last I heard, she partied like a rock star up until COVID took over. Then she spent that time alone, wishing she had someone stable she could build a life with. Haven't heard much about her in the last 4 or 5 years other than some comments made by mutual friends that she was still single. I wish her the best and hoped she found what she was looking for. I just wish she hadn't used me as a cover for 14 years. Next story. I asked for my then husband to take the day off so we could celebrate our first anniversary together. He said sure, but when I asked him why he was getting ready for work that morning, he said he didn't want to take the day off. It was the last straw for what felt like a bait and switch as soon as the ink dried on the marriage certificate. A friend took me hiking and I had a nice meltdown in the woods. I got a call late in the afternoon while on the hike from him asking where I was. Like, dude, did you just want me to sit at home all day? Next story. We got married in the spring. By Christmas, I knew I wanted a divorce. He stopped putting in any effort towards the relationship. He got sick/injured at work and wasn't working. He would sit around all day, every day, and do nothing. No housework, no grocery shopping. He would just watch TV and play video games. His family hated me, and I hated them. I had found messages from him and a woman he met online from one of his games. I told him I knew he was messaging her. I asked to go to marriage counseling. He initially agreed, but then refused to go. I was waiting until after Christmas to have a serious discussion with him. Christmas Day, we spent it with his family, and his mom made her usual crappy comments to me. After they left, I pointed out to him that his mom was a female dog to me again. He told me, there's nothing you can do about it now. We're married, so just get used to it and get over it. That's when I knew it was over. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life taking care of him and being disrespected by him and his family. I told him I wanted a divorce after the new year, and it was finalized 4 months after that. Next story. We had a ton of small issues, arguments and such. No physical abuse, maybe some emotional or verbal. It's been 15 years, so I don't remember all of it. She took our daughter and went to stay with her sister for a month or two. When she came home, we got along so much better for about 2, maybe 3 weeks. Then we both started up on our bullcrap again. Eventually, we figured out that while we were good friends, living in the same house just wasn't working out. That was, I feel, the moment when the cracks in the marriage broke open wide. We still tried to make it work off and on for a few years. We had the kid, and I'd been raised to believe that marriage was forever no matter what. For me, though, the final moment of clarity was when I stopped trying to sleep with her. Once I got that goal out of my head, I finally processed that it was never going to work again. I needed to stop fighting for it. She, I believe, had stopped way before that. Now, a little more than a decade later, we're divorced and she's remarried. I've got a life partner, we still parent together well and are still good friends. Honestly, we've moved on enough to be able to laugh about it and look back on just the good times. This is just the good ending, right? When two people find that they're not meshing, not working, break off, find what they really want from life and do that, and still manage to exist peacefully with each other and raise a child together, well, this is incredible. Like, Opie and their ex, honestly, did great. Next story. The moment that he stood over me, yelling at me whether I was happy now after he had left my 2-year-old in the room alone when I thought he had taken him so I could finish up putting weather stripping on the door that he kept saying he would finish, but was left in a heap on the door, and while I was shutting the door to make sure the seal was tight, my 2-year-old put his finger between the door, causing me to shut his finger in it. I was sobbing and rocking him to my lap, telling him I was sorry for hurting him and having a grown man laughing and yelling at me while our son was hurt. He was getting back at me because I was always telling him to watch our son when he was supposed to keep an eye on him so I could study for school. Instead, he would be on his phone, causing my son to fall down the stairs twice. So he acted like he was taking our son out to the garage with him, but he actually just lifted him and set him down far enough behind me so he could blame me when our son got hurt. Next story. Moved to a different country for her after 2 years apart. Got there and no hugs, no kisses. Quickly just started being treated like a roommate. And when I would ask what was going on, being told she had to get used to being around me again, which was okay. Then noticed she didn't have issues with other people giving her a hug, and she was close with one other person. Asked her if she still loved me. She said yes, but just needed time. Few weeks ago, bring it up and ask again, and she tells me no, but wants to work on it. Decided we were done at that point and figured my way back stateside. If I give up everything for you and you tell me you don't love me despite all of that, then what are we doing here? Next story. I asked for one specific thing for my birthday. I'd expressed numerous times that I knew it was a little pricey. I didn't want anything else or to do anything else, but that was what I really wanted. Day of my birthday comes, and nothing. Later in the evening when I get home from work, I see a ridiculous gift that cost over twice of what I actually wanted. I asked him about it and he said he remembered I pointed it out in the mall and said it was cool. So you remember when I randomly point something out in the mall, but not the thing I actually wanted that I told you about over and over? Our relationship was already rocky at that point. This was the final nail in the coffin for me. I ended up leaving a month and a half later. It was hard because he wasn't a bad person, but he was very immature, and we'd grown apart after so many years together. Now I have a partner who puts a lot of thought into everything. It's incredible to have someone who wants to do everything they can to make you happy, and then you want to do the same for them. Next story. When my passion project race car was 99% finished, but I couldn't bleed the clutch alone. Racing was an integral part of my life before the relationship with previous championships won. I asked her to take 10 minutes from playing her COD addiction to help me. I set it up so she wouldn't even have to get into the car. Just push this stick when I ask for it. I got the response, "If you don't have the people to support and help you, maybe you shouldn't pursue this." I ended up figuring out how to do it alone, but the fact my wife and best friend at the time wouldn't even consider helping me for a few moments, that stuck with me that I am alone in my dreams, and I shouldn't expect anyone's help with anything. Next story. There was an orb spider who built a web across the little used pathway in our backyard. He had to walk around it on the rare occasions he went there and complained, saying he took the web down and she just built it again. I asked him to just leave her. She was beautiful and it was easy to walk around. He ended her. The years of putting up with gaslighting, disrespect, and neglect just all accumulated in that one act of a-holery, and I finally realized that I had reached the point of hating him. Took about a year of me trying to fix myself before I finally realized that nothing was going to make this work. Nearly 8 years ago, as the saying goes, getting divorced was absolutely awful. Being divorced is blissful. Next story. My husband at the time found out that his ex-girlfriend was back in town and had tried to contact him. He told me he wasn't interested in seeing her. I found out he was seeing her behind my back when her husband came to my work and proceeded to berate me in front of all my coworkers that my husband was seeing his wife. When confronted, my husband said he was seeing her because she told him that she had a child 20 years ago and she thought it was his. I could have probably gotten past all that, but when I asked him if he was ever going to tell me about his probable child, he said no, he wasn't planning on it. It was the final nail in the coffin, as it truly demonstrated I would never be his partner in life. And that was what I wanted out of a marriage. This was, of course, on top of multiple other things that he had done, as he was an actual diagnosed narcissist. As painful as it was, I was always a little grateful that it happened, as we did have a child together, and I was fairly determined to make it work for our son's sake. After I left, though, I was so much happier, and I was a much better parent to our child. My ex wound up passing away of a sudden cardiac arrest when our son was 7, so it worked out in the end. OP, what do you mean you could have gotten past all that? If I'm married with someone and they tell me they have a secret potential child and that they were sneaking around meeting up with their ex and they never planned on telling me, or I don't know, I don't need the never telling me part. Just the rest is enough to make me really question things. You gave this guy too many chances as it is, it sounds like. Next story. I got a much better paying job about 2 years into our marriage, making more myself than we had made combined. Rather than taking it as an opportunity to have a really solid start to our savings as we had discussed, he took it as an opportunity to stop going to work. He would start calling in sick more and drinking more during the day. The house was always a mess and we were always out of food and alcohol because he and his buddies would consume it all while I was at work. Eventually, I begged him to go to work, do more around the house, or get whatever help he needed if he was having a mental health issue. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Or else what?" His eyes looked dead and cold. No love there at all. That's when I knew. Luckily, I filed for divorce before he took out a credit card and maxed it out. He did that between when I filed and when he was served, so he thought he was sticking me with it. And his mom, a whole story on her own, blamed me for his behavior because I earned more and took away her son's, quote, masculine role within the marriage by earning more than him. Never mind that I discussed the job change with my ex before accepting and he agreed to it quite readily. That was a major case of addition by subtraction. The peace I felt when he moved out was immeasurable. Next story. I think I knew when he woke me up at 2 a.m. to fight with me. He was drunk and mad. I was 6 months pregnant with our second baby. He was never physically abusive, but he was scary that night. He finally passed out with our 18-month-old in his arms, so I wouldn't leave. I pretended to sleep when he got up at 7 for work. He woke me, apologized, and said the things that usually worked. They didn't work this time. This time, all I could hear was my own voice explaining the cycle of abuse to my high school students. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the honeymoon phase. It took me 2 years to escape with all my kids, but I knew that morning it was over. Next story. My wedding day, I couldn't even look my father in the eye before we walked down the aisle. My gut knew something was wrong, and a week before I sat my ex down and told him that if there was anything he needed to tell me, he should tell me then and I would work through it. But if he didn't tell me and I found out for myself, there wouldn't even be a conversation. It would just be over. He said there was nothing, so we got married. Didn't even consummate our marriage until a week later. 3 weeks later, I was using his computer to write an exam and discovered an auto-populated email address I had never seen before. Went digging and found out he had multiple affairs over the years with both women and men. He was on every dating site possible, including signing up for Ashley Madison within days of us getting married. I know this is a terrible thought. But do you think he was like rubbing his hands like a little fly before they were getting married? Like, yes, I can finally get on Ashley Madison. I've been waiting. What a freak, dude. Next story. We were out to dinner and I heard someone calling my name. I turned around to see an old friend I hadn't seen in about 10 years. I got up to give her a hug and went to introduce her to my partner, and he completely ignored me and kept reading the menu. I was embarrassed and she could sense it and went back to her table. When I sat back down, I said, "I wanted to introduce you," and he angrily replied that he was hungry. Later, during dinner, I quietly said, "Hey, it really hurt my feelings earlier when you refused to meet my friend." And then he proceeded to tell me I was wrong, to explain why he was right, and wouldn't let up until I agreed that he was right, and it was actually rude of my friend to approach me when we were trying to eat dinner together. When I said I'm allowed to feel hurt, he replied, "Not when you're wrong." I cried the car ride home, and I realized I didn't want to be with him anymore. Next story. I knew I wanted a divorce the day I found the love letters from his ex-girlfriend in his gym bag. The notes were recent, detailed, and intimate. They spoke about their get-togethers and how much she missed him. For years I suspected he was cheating, but every time I brought it up he told me I was crazy, psychotic, and imagining things. When she would call, he'd immediately get up and leave the room or the house. I controlled the cell phone account, so I pulled the numbers, did reverse searches, and confirmed what I already knew. When I confronted him, he flipped it on me, calling me a snoop and crazy all over again. He called me crazy a lot. But the moment I read those letters, something inside me broke and then immediately reset. I cried a deep, painful cry, the kind that comes from years of being lied to. And then, just like that, I stopped. In that instant, I decided I was done crying. I was done. During the divorce, I learned there had been yet another woman, one who believed they were engaged. She was a single mother. The other one is married with children. There were others too. Women constantly flirted with him and he happily reciprocated. Being a doctor made him a magnet for that kind of attention and he never turned it down. That day in the gym bag was the moment the denial finally ended. Years of denial and degradation. And I became focused on an exit plan with my child. Next story. When he dropped me off at an abortion clinic because he had a meeting at work, the nurse ripped him a new one when he was late picking me me up. We weren't married, but we lived together. He ended up marrying a really unattractive woman we both knew. She and her husband were our friends. They'd been cheating for some time, I guess, and she had low self-esteem, so I'm sure that's one reason he cheated. She'd let him get away with anything. I never got even one drop of love like all my friends got. I tried, put myself out there. I have a great heart, great mind, and spirit, and men find me attractive, they say. I just never found anyone who clicked, where we moved on to the next step. I'm in my 40s, and let's be honest, it's likely never to happen. I laugh at myself at how I used to hope. I imagined myself having love and somehow finding joy despite the pain I suffered with him, but no. All that inspirational stuff people say, it doesn't always happen. Sometimes people just get hurt. They get no one, and they die. And the people who treated them like crap get everything they hoped for themselves. I know OP isn't going to hear this, but maybe someone who's listening is feeling the same way. I believe that this sort of thing isn't over until you fully believe it's over. I know it's stupid self-help garbage, but a mindset really is important. If you are every day telling yourself that it's not going to happen, you're never going to find anyone, it's over for you, then yeah, that's going to be your reality because you're going to have a really hard time connecting with people and you're not going to be putting yourself in situations where you can connect with people. I think OP needs some therapy first and love after. Love is definitely something you have to be ready for. And it sounds like OP has some healing to do and they don't really know it yet. I wish them the best of luck. For now, though, that's the last story for today. I would like to thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.